so that is about much more than a building. It's about building the church. It's about building your faith, building my faith. It's about trusting God. For some of us, like we've never trusted God before. Some of you have never consistently prayed for 7 weeks in a row, centered around the same kind of big idea and concept. That's a powerful thing. That'll change your life if you jump in with it. Some of you never in your life have ever taken off 2 days of work because you got extra time. You just say, I'm going to take off 2 days of work because I'm going to go help serve and I'm going to paint some walls or I'm going to scrape some floors. I'm going to do this thing. You've never served like that. It's going to change your life. Some of you have never given sacrificially in any way to anybody and anything. And maybe God's been speaking to you about how and what sacrifice might look like for you in this season to make this vision a reality. And man, I would encourage you, just lean into God because he wants to build something way more than a renovated little, whatever this thing was, warehouse turned into an event center, turned into a church. Like he wants to do way more than build a building. He wants to build his church. Now, as we've been discovering what building his church looks like, we've been leaning into the book of Acts, into this start story of the church, and we've been discovering and acquainting ourselves with what are the 5 purposes of the church, the whole reason the church exists. And today, in this last installment, as we hit this 5th purpose, what I want to show you is the thing that makes the church, that starting church, and this church today, truly remarkable. Now, the other 4 matter. The other 4 are significant. The other 4 truly are the reasons why we exist. But this 5th one is what makes the church remarkable. Or to say it another way, this 5th one is the purple cow of the church. Yeah, I didn't stutter. Purple cow. Maybe you're unfamiliar with this incredible work. There's a book by a guy named Seth Godin. You may be unfamiliar with him, but he's a writer, a marketer of sorts. And one of his books that really popped probably about 12 years ago was a short little book called The Purple Cow. I know, it's a weird title, right? But that's what it's called. And the whole idea that he lays out in this book is built around this simple idea. Imagine that you're driving down a little country road, which you ain't got to imagine hard. Just drive like into Mississippi, or going to Arkansas. You can find a country road real quick. Just drive you on a little country road where you got like farmland on one side, farmland on the other side, and you're driving around, you just see crops. And then you come across a group of cows, right? You see a group of cows, and what do you expect to see? Brown cow, black cow, brown cow, black cow. This is what you see. That one is kind of white, but you just see cows. Brown cow, black cow. Yeah, that's what you see. He says, imagine that you're driving along and you see all these brown cows and black cows like you would expect to see. And then as you're driving, all of a sudden you look out to the right, and as you look out to the right, you see a cow, and this one stands out to you because it is purple. Now, it's still a cow. 4 legs, chewing his cud, it's a cow. It's a cow. But it's purple. If you were driving down the road and saw a purple cow, you would pull over immediately. Why? Because do you know how many likes and retweets your selfie would get, with you with an actual purple cow? What on earth? Like you would stop and investigate this cow because everything about it was just like every other cow except that it was purple, and its color made it remarkable. And what Seth uses this little illustration to then lead into is that most people, most businesses, most freelancers, most nonprofits, most churches, most organizations, most everything are basically doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing. And people think when they're going to start something or when they're going to do something, we're going to build something, they're going to do something that, wait for it, has never been done before. And that's how I'm going to make my mark on the world. And that's how we're going to change everything. No one has ever done this before. And he says that's actually probably not true. More often than not, people will not do something that has never been done before. But what you can do is do something different in what you do that everyone does that makes you remarkable. See, it's not that you serve chicken sandwiches. It's that you create a superior chicken sandwich. And then people will wait in your slow lines to get your delicious bun and your spicy little sauce on there. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Popeyes. You can make a better sandwich You ain't got to invent it. You just got to make it better. And if you make it better, you can make it so remarkable that people will start to stop for you, not because there aren't other chicken sandwiches. There are other chicken sandwiches. There are cheaper chicken sandwiches. There are more expensive chicken sandwiches. But your chicken sandwich is remarkable. It's purple. And I want to show you the purple cow of the church. I want to show you what from the beginning was remarkable, has been remarkable, and always has the opportunity to be remarkable. And it's found in Acts chapter 2. We've been reading it every week. Let's read it together one more time. Acts chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 41. It says, those who accepted his message, this is in your notes, also in the Bible, you're welcome to open that too. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to, circle this word, this is what we're spending time on today, and to fellowship. I know, you're like, that doesn't sound all that remarkable. Give me a minute. To the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and they had everything in common. They sold their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people, everybody. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now, just as a recap, one more time, Jesus is gone. He has been crucified. He spent 3 days in a borrowed tomb and resurrected from the grave. He appeared to about 500 people, and now he has ascended to heaven. And there are about 120 people waiting in an upper room in Jerusalem, waiting for the promise of the Holy Spirit that Jesus said to wait for. So they said, all right. He said, wait. He was the resurrected one. I'm going to do what he said. So they waited. And they waited in this upper room. And then in Acts chapter 2, we hear about this outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And they're all filled with the Holy Spirit. They begin to speak in other tongues, and the Spirit gives them the ability to. And people are like, what on earth is going on? What is happening? Because people were in Jerusalem from all over the world, and people were actually speaking and preaching this gospel in their native language, even though they didn't know that language. And it's like, what is happening here? And Peter stood up and preached a message. This is the bulk of what's happening in Acts chapter 2. He preaches a message and he says, Jesus was the one and you had killed him, so repent. Like, that's basically what he said. And he preaches this message and then people respond to it. In this end of Acts chapter 2, Luke sort of defines what begins to happen right after that sermon. Because see, it started with that sermon. Because that's the first purpose of the church, not sermons, but evangelism, to tell people about Jesus. And then to grow people in their faith in Jesus. And then to help people serve other people because of their faith in Jesus. We call that ministry. And then to be able to do all that you do as worship and praise to God, who gives you the ability to respond to him in that way. That's the fourth purpose, worship. And then we end with this fifth purpose of the church, which is what makes the church remarkable. And it's this idea called fellowship. Now, fellowship is a uniquely churched word that has become a bit of a junk drawer of terms. Do you have a junk drawer in your house? Something that's just it's got like pens and paper clips and an extra pair of underwear and like sock, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just got like all sorts of stuff. It's weird. Yeah, I don't like junk drawers, but I understand them. My wife is a fan. We have 3. Just saying. These junk drawers, just get everything thrown into them. And the word fellowship has become a junk drawer for church. People will say they're having fellowship when they just go get lunch with their best friend who happens to believe in Jesus. It's like, we over here fellowshipping, don't they? Real churchy people. Some of you are like, I don't say that. Yeah, me either. But people do say that. If you have a large space in your church house that is not the auditorium or the sanctuary, and you don't really have a definitive purpose for it, it's not really like a commons area, it's not really for the kids, it's just an extra space we got. People will even use and define that space as a hall of fellowship, right? Get a couple folks together and we watching the game, and well, they all happen to believe in Jesus, so I guess we are fellowshipping. And that's what people say. Can I tell you, that's not fellowship? And some of you are like, thank you. True. Fellowship is much deeper. That's not what I said. Fellowship isn't deeper. It's more diverse. It's not deeper. It's more diverse. See, most people think fellowship, when they hear this term, they think of handpicking people very similar to them, right? They're about my same age, same stage of life. We all got small kids. We're all in college. We're all retired. We all vote the same. We all eat at the same restaurant about the same time. We all think the same. We all see the world the same. And so we're going to get together with those people. And when we get together, we are fellowshipping. I don't know that you are. Because you're excluding a lot of people in what you're doing by how you assimilate and agglomerate the people that you are connecting with. Fellowship. See, what we like to do is actually define things with it, but that's wrong. If you're taking notes today, and I'd encourage you to do this, write this down in your notes, that fellowship isn't a definition as much as it's a distinctive. Fellowship isn't a definition. It's not something that we take and apply to some gathering, apply to a few people, apply to a space and say, now I can define this thing as having some communal church purpose because I have called it fellowship. Wrong. It is not a definition near as much as it is a distinctive. Can I teach for a minute? Like, rather than just kind of like, let me teach you real quick what's going on here in the book of Acts chapter 2 and how the world is seen in that time. You know, there are things that you do, there are ways that you do them that are very unique to you. I know you think everybody does Thanksgiving just like you do Thanksgiving in your family, but can I tell you that is not the case? It's just not. Like, start dating somebody and you'll find out real quickly that your family traditions are different. You will. It's the holiday season, Thanksgiving, and then followed by Christmas, followed by New Year's. Just meet some people and start talking to them and say, hey, what do you do? And you're going to find out that people do entirely different things at Christmas than you do. Entirely different things at New Year's than you do. You're going to find that some people, like they believe they will die if they don't eat black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. You know what I'm saying? And there are some people, if you even happen to mention not having turkey and ham at Thanksgiving, baby, you better get behind me. What are you talking about? And do not call it dressing, it is stuffing. You know, like you will find all sorts of differences. Because people do things different. Some of you think that every family in the world has a family reunion. Because you get together with your family and have a family reunion every year. Would it shock you to know that there are people that don't even know the names of their cousins? Oh, my bad. Would that shock you? Because people do things differently. But yet we're all naturally programmed to see the world and operate and think these things happen the way that we see them. Which makes reading the scriptures so difficult on this account. This right here. When we read the scriptures, most of us were born in the West, North America. And as Westerners, we have a very individualistic view of the world. We do. We even say things and like things said like you should go for your dreams. You should go for your dreams. You should be the best you that you can be. I like that. I love it. You know? Like whatever I want. If it feels good to you, you should do it. Is that what you want to do? You can be whatever you want to be with your life. I sound like a positive motivational speaker, don't I? Or the last 20 things you liked on Facebook, don't I? Like you should go for it and achieve it and do what you want to do. And that sounds so normal to us as Westerners because we view the world individualistically. It's about us. But 2,000 years ago, and really not even 2,000 years ago, it's still this way today. But 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, where this first church began, they did not see the world that way. The Eastern perspective is one of collectivism. It's one of, I choose to do what is good for my community, what is good for my group. And watch me, everybody's got a group. Everybody does. Everybody has a family, they have a tribe, they have a people that they run with. You know, there's a story about Jesus. It's told by Luke, who also wrote the book of Acts. And it's really the only glimpse we get into his childhood. And it's very weird for us to understand it as Westerners because it talks about when he's like 12 years old, his parents lose him going to church and they lose him for like a long time. And we're like, how could this happen? Somebody needs to call Child Protective Services on Mary and Joseph because they are not responsible people to handle the Son of God. My goodness, That's the way we think, don't we? Here's the problem. What you fail to realize is they were a part of a collective sort of society. When they went to temple, they probably rolled into temple 50 or 100 deep. Cousins and nieces and nephews and aunt and uncle and Meemaw and Peepaw and Papaw and Moo-hoo and all of them, like just everybody would come. And they roll so deep. If you roll 75 deep into a festival you had to be at for a few days, you'd probably lose your kid too. And so it's hard sometimes for us to read the scriptures as individualized Westerners and wrap ourselves into what was going on then and there. Even we hear about things that sound so strange to us. This sounds strange to me too. The idea of arranged marriages. Doesn't that sound strange? Like, why are you going to pick for me who I'm supposed to marry? And it sounds strange to us as Westerners, but people who grew up in the East, people who are a part of this sort of collective society who see the world that way, would actually look at us and say, what makes you think you as an individual are wiser than a group of people that have loved me since I was born, who have my best interest at heart? I'd much rather have them arranged for me than me figure it out on my own. It's a collective society. Now, I say that because I need you to see what's going on here in Acts chapter 2 with that lens, that collective lens. Because community that was formed, this community that was formed was striking, right? We read about it. They fellowshiped. And so much of Luke, his writing here, talks about what they did. They were selling property and they ate together and did all this kind of stuff. And it was crazy. And it was so striking because it was much more. I need you to see this. It's much more than something people didn't have. I think sometimes we hear these verses read. Some of you may have heard somebody teach these verses to you before, and it almost felt like what was happening is the church happened and people responded, and all of a sudden all these lonely, individualistic people now had the opportunity to make friends. And it's like, for the first time, friendship has blessed the world. Acts chapter 2, verse 42. Here comes friendship. No. Some of us picture this idea of community happening like it's water in the desert. No. No, it's water in the ocean. It's not this thing that had never been seen before. It's actually something that was very common in that day. Everybody had community. Everybody had a people. Everybody had stuff they could go to, people they could lean into, people they could roll with. But this first church, their community stood out. And it stood out not in a place where there was absolutely nothing like it. Their community stood out in a place where everybody was in community. I love basketball. I do. I love basketball. I love the NBA in particular. I love watching the NBA. I love going to games. I love our team here. I love the Grizzlies. Shout out to John Moran, Jaren Jackson Jr. We love them. We are excited for them. It is fun basketball. Brandon Clark, Jonas Valanciunas, Titus Jones. Like, I would love basketball. And I love the NBA. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the NBA is a basketball league, a professional basketball league that has its teams in the United States, but it is a worldwide league. Basically, if you are very, very good at basketball and you live anywhere in this world, the NBA is going to try to pull you in. They just are. You will see a collection of players on teams now that hail from countries all over the world, which means that the people in the NBA have the best basketball skills of anybody in the world. Correct? Correct. All right. I ain't got time to wait. Correct. All right. One of the fundamental basketball skills that every person would need to have is the ability to shoot the basketball. Because if you can't put the ball through the hoop, you got problems, right? You ain't gonna win basketball games. And so you could make the case that the best shooters of the basketball find themselves in the NBA. Now, I know you watch an NBA game and you think, man, if I was out there, I'd be making that shot. Child, please. No, you would not. But you think you would. But the very best shooters on this planet of the basketball are in the NBA, which makes watching Steph Curry shoot the basketball so much more intriguing. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Steph Curry, he plays for the Golden State Warriors, or he used to. He broke his hand 2 weeks ago, and he ain't playing the rest of this year. But he plays for the Golden State Warriors, and many people consider him to be the greatest shooter of the basketball that has ever lived. This is how great he is at shooting the basketball. These players warm up in advance of the game. They will come out in the neighborhood of 2 hours before the game and kind of get a sweat in, stretch, get some shots up, and do that type of thing. Then they go back to the locker room. And very rarely do you see that many people gather around for shoot-around, except for Steph Curry. When Steph comes to town, or even in his own home arena, people get to the arena hours in advance, hundreds of people, every game, random games on a weird Thursday night in February. Hundreds of people are there to watch this man shoot the basketball. Because even in a league full of the greatest shooters in the world, his ability stands out because of how great it is. Can't nobody shoot like Steph. Can't nobody shoot like Steph. And you can say that not because he's shooting against me or shooting against you or shooting against the imaginary version of you. He is literally shooting in games with the greatest shooters in the world. And even all these people who play this game on the highest level say, that dude is the man. That's the one. He's the best at this. I'm done talking about basketball for a minute, but I wanted you to see that because what's happening in this fellowship that's going on in that first church is very much like Steph Curry shooting in the NBA. There are a lot of great shooters. Steph is greater. There was a lot of community in that day. A lot of people had relationship, but this was different, and this was unique, and this was remarkable, what that first church had. And the reason fellowship stood out so much isn't because of what the church was doing, but because of who they were doing, what they were doing with. I'm going to get you to where we got to go here in the next couple minutes. Don't worry. The reason it stood out wasn't because of what they were doing. Community was happening. But it was because of who they were doing, what they were doing with. Write this in your notes. Fellowship is a translation of the Greek word koinonia. Now, normally that would be on the screen. My apologies. Let me spell it for you. K, not a C. Koinonia. 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 And koinonia appears for the first time in the book of Acts chapter 2, verse 42. And we translate it as the word fellowship. It appears 19 times in the New Testament. And this idea of koinonia has the idea of participation, of a joint sharing of things, of my investment for our good. It has this collaborative idea to it. But understand something about words in Greek and in Hebrew too. There's a picture or an essence or a power often around words. They mean more than just what they mean. And there's this particular focus in the word koinonia. And it's this idea of focusing on what we have in common, not on what separates us. It's this idea in koinonia, fellowship, that I focus on what it is we have in common, not on what it is that might separate us. I'm going to give my attention to the things that connect us, rather than give my attention to the thing that give me reason to not be connected to you. You know, most people give their attention to the things that separate us, don't we? Why don't you hang out with them? I don't like their personality. What you're saying is you're an introvert, they're an extrovert, or they're an extrovert, like that's what you're saying. And it's, you've decided to focus on what's different. I don't like them. Why don't you like them? They're way too young for me. I shouldn't be hanging around with people of that youngness. What? Do you know who they voted for? I can't hang out for them. Can't hang out with them. We focus on our differences. And I'm here to tell you, if you focus on what's different, you will always have a divide. If you focus on what's different, you can write that down, you will always have a divide. If you walk into relationships, if you walk into any setting, choosing to focus on what you have different than somebody else, you will always have a divide. And in that day, at that time, that's the way people operated. They amalgamated themselves, they gathered themselves with people who were just like them. And so if we have ethnic differences, well, you can go over there and I'm gonna be over here with my people. And if we have worship style differences, you can go over there and I'm gonna be over here with my people. And if you see this that way, I see it this way, you can go over there and I'm gonna stay over him, you know? Because they focused on their differences. And we do the same thing today. But if you focus on your differences, you're always gonna have a divide. But watch me, write this down. If you'll focus on what you have in common, you will always have a connection. If you choose to focus not on what separates you, but what could bring you together, you will always have the opportunity for connection. And what koinonia does, what koinonia says, is it says, I'm going to choose to overlook things that could divide us because I'm going to bring my focus, I'm going to bring my attention to something that connects us. Some of y'all still don't see where we're going. We're going somewhere. This group of people started acting different. Here's how koinonia plays out. Koinonia plays out that I start serving people that I wouldn't normally serve because of what it is we have in common. Koinonia will find you loving people that normally you would found reason to hate, but instead you're going to choose to love because of what it is you have in common. It will find you serving people, caring for people, providing for people, investing in people, being concerned about folk that you have a lot different than, but you have something in common. It's that commonality. And that is what's remarkable about that church. Koinonia, not their evangelism, not their discipleship, not their worship, not their ministry. Their koinonia is what made that church remarkable. It's what made it stand out. Why? Because think about this. Jews who for hundreds of years had wanted nothing to do with Samaritans now started inviting Samaritans into their home. Jews and Samaritans who for thousands of years had wanting nothing to do with Gentiles now invited themselves over to the Gentiles' house. What are we talking about? People who their whole life, who the whole lineage of their family had never eaten food that was unclean, now sat down at somebody else's table and had a 3-piece dark and some pork and beans. Why? Because it's what they were serving. Koinonia. Women who had never been allowed to have a place at the table, women who had never been put into leadership were now allowed a seat at the table, given a voice. They were valued and put into leadership. Why? Koinonia. Here's what happened. People who had nothing in common chose to have everything in common because they held Jesus in common. Koinonia. That's what changed the game. Koinonia. Because then you see Jews go over to Gentiles' house, and they would have never done that. Keep reading the story in the book of Acts, and there's all these tensions around what? What you eat, where you go, what is clean, what is not, and all these tensions. Why? Because for hundreds of years, thousands of years, in some of these cases, these had been sticking points and blocks. But now, koinonia says, because we have Jesus in common, I'm not going to focus on what it is that separates us. I'm not going to focus on what it is that could divide us because we have Jesus in common. We're going to stay connected. See, what was so remarkable about that first church was when people looked at who were in their circles, they said, my goodness, there must be something going on here. Because it wasn't just people who all were the same color. It wasn't just people who were all of the same political persuasion. It wasn't just people who were all of the same age and stage of life. It wasn't just people who economically find themselves in a similar bracket. It was poor people sitting at the table with wealthy people. It was Jews and Samaritans and Gentiles sitting at the table together. It was people who would call others outcasts and heathens because of their worship style, sitting down at the same table with the people that they had spent all their time rejecting their whole life. Now they're sitting at the table with them. Koinonia. And in Jerusalem, people looked around and said, my goodness, something has happened here. Can I tell you, koinonia is still remarkable today. You know what's remarkable about you? What's remarkable about this place is we don't all look the same. Some of you still have a hard time believing you come and sit down and listen to a white guy preach. Koinonia. Some of you still have a hard time believing that you sit in a room and there are people who vote Democratic or Republican. Koinonia. Some of you have a hard time recognizing the fact that you sit in a room with people who are old enough to be your grandparents, but yet you stay plugged into what's happening. Why? Koinonia. Can I tell you, that's what's remarkable? That's why I believe in what we're doing so much. Because if there was ever a day, ever a time that a place needed a church for all people, it's now. What is that? It's koinonia. It's we ain't got to have everything in common, but because we hold Jesus in common, I can overlook things that usually would divide us. I can overlook things that usually would break us apart. Why? Koinonia. Because I'm going to choose to be connected to you. Do you understand? These people rolled deep. They had connections, but they saw a group of people come together. They said, whatever the reason is behind their coming together, I want to know, because those people don't ever come together, but they came together because of Jesus. Tell me more. Koinonia. Can I tell you, even today, that's still our purple cow? You know, that's how this church even got birthed in my heart. It was April 2011. See, why do you remember that so clearly? Basketball. I was walking out of game 6, the first round series that the Grizzlies played against the San Antonio Spurs. The Grizzlies were the 8th seed, the Spurs were the 1 seed. And in game 6, we wrecked them. Zebo had 31 points. He could not be stopped. It was unbelievable. Those were the good old days. I love it. Growl towel in tow. We was ready to go. It was great. The Grizzlies would have won the title that year if they didn't suspend Zach Randolph for game 7 against the Thunder, but I ain't got time to talk about that because we got to wrap up here in a minute. I'm telling you, goodness. But I walked out of game 6, and I'd been to Grizzly games before, and I was there with a few people that I knew. And we parked on like the southeast side of the Forum. So we had to walk across this field, this sort of park area to the area where we had parked. And I remember getting outside of the arena, just right outside the arena, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of people in this field just walking around. And I saw people high-fiving one another. I saw people hugging one another. I saw people talking to one another. And then I started looking at the people that were high-fiving and hugging and talking, and I was like, they do not know one another. They don't know each other. Because then I started seeing people high five, and then they break off and go in separate ways. I started listening to people talk, and they never called anybody by name. They was like, man, Zebo, you couldn't stop Zebo. Did you see that steal Tony had? Oh my God. Like they were just talking. And it was all man, buddy, pal, which means I don't know who you are. And I saw something. And as I saw it, the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart as clear as I've ever heard anything in my life. It said, if basketball could bring people together like this, what could the gospel do? If it was committed to being a church for all people. What if people high-fived and hugged? What if people loved each other? Not because they had everything in common. What could it do in a community? What could it do in a city? What could it do in a country if people said, look, I'm going to look past everything, every reason I have to be divided from you, and I'm going to choose to be connected to you because what we have in common is Jesus. And Jesus has changed my life. Jesus has done it all for me. And because he has, I will love you even though you vote different than me, even though you have different traditions than me, even though you eat different than me, even though you think different than me, even though you're 2 generations younger than me or 2 generations older than I don't care. I'm going to be connected to you. I'm going to sit at the table with you because Jesus, koinonia is still remarkable. And that's why we fight like we fight and build like we build. Because I believe that is still the thing that should be remarkable about the gathered church in Jesus' name is that people look and they go, this doesn't look like the rest of society. Not because of its holiness, not because of its tradition, but because of the dynamics of the people that are a part of it. That is what they saw. That is what they said drew them and brought favor with all the people, was because they said, my goodness, look at what is happening in this diverse group of people. That is fellowship, powered by koinonia.